The 2026 Netflix Roast of Kevin Hart was billed as a massive live event designed to celebrate a historic career in comedy. But almost as soon as the cameras rolled, the tribute fractured. The night quickly crossed rigid cultural lines. First, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson targeted NBA player Draymond Green, specifically calling his name the laziest black name and using the R word twice on a live broadcast. Shortly after, comedian Shane Gillis took the podium, introducing jokes that centered directly around American slavery. In under an hour, an event designed to honor black excellence had pivoted. It became an exercise in mining marginalized trauma for shock value. The broadcast reached its most volatile point when Tony Hinchcliffe took the microphone. He delivered a punchline about George Floyd looking up at us, struggling to breathe, explicitly implying Floyd was in hell. That moment stood in stark contrast to the man sitting in the guest of honor's chair. 4 years prior, Kevin Hart physically attended George Floyd's funeral, kneeling in front of the casket to support the grieving family. Floyd's brother, Terrence, watched the roast. He spoke out immediately, expressing deep pain that his 12-year-old niece's father was being used as a punchline, and questioning why Hart didn't intervene. The grieving family, along with a massive online audience, looked directly to the host for a defense. Instead, they found a complete vacuum of accountability. The internet's focus then shifted from the people on stage to the people behind the cameras, thanks to a public critique from Saturday Night Live's Michael Che. Che pointed out a disturbing detail. The most extreme jokes of the night, the ones focusing on slavery, slain teenagers, and racial slurs, were penned by a core writing room of 5 white men, hired by Shane Gillis. This dynamic taps into a pattern that defined early American show business: white creators controlling the caricature of black life for a profit. From the 19th century minstrel stage to early radio, the power to define the narrative rarely belonged to the people being depicted. Looking at this diagram of the event's writing structure, a clear disparity emerges. On one side, we have the subjects of the most offensive material: George Floyd, Draymond Green, and the victims of slavery. Follow the lines across, and they trace directly back to a predominantly white group of joke writers cashing the checks. Seeing these connections shifted the public debate. For many, the roast was no longer an experiment in edgy satire, but a visible demonstration of one group's history being monetized by people who do not share it. As the backlash grew, cultural commentators like Joe Budden zeroed in on the executive producer. Budden accused Hart of gaslighting his own community, suggesting his immense wealth had insulated him from the realities of the people who supported his rise. The pressure peaked when Hart appeared on the nationally syndicated Breakfast Club radio show to address the fallout. He offered a slight concession, admitting that the George Floyd joke was tasteless to our culture, and that he personally didn't like it. But he followed that immediately with a fierce deflection. Hart stated he wasn't going to drag a comedian off a live stage, refused to apologize for the production, and bluntly told offended fans they simply shouldn't watch. Forced to make a choice, Hart prioritized protecting his Hollywood ecosystem and the ruthless tradition of roast comedy over offering cultural solidarity to the victims of those jokes. Hart's defense rests on the worldview of the comedy purist. Roasts have zero boundaries. By agreeing to participate, you accept that absolutely nothing is off-limits. Cultural critics counter that worldview by pointing out that jokes about historical trauma and slain citizens do not exist in a vacuum. They carry real-world consequences for the families involved and the communities watching. Because Kevin Hart didn't personally write the George Floyd joke or speak the punchline into the microphone, does he owe the public an apology? He was the executive producer, the namesake, and the ultimate financial beneficiary of the event. He financed the exact environment that allowed white writers to monetize black trauma, leaving the responsibility squarely on his shoulders. Modern arguments over provocative humor now focus on the infrastructure of the comedy industry itself. These clashes highlight a tension between individual creative license and the reality of institutional power, identifying who sits in the writer's room and who receives the final payout. A massive Hollywood production built to celebrate black excellence ultimately exposed a lingering, uncomfortable truth about who is still left as the punchline.